I remember the exact second my heart stopped. Not because someone told me later. Not because I read it in a medical report. I remember it because I felt it, like a clock inside my chest winding down. Tick, tick, silence. A silence so total, so absolute, that the world didn't go dark. It went still. It was a Tuesday, March 4th, 11:43 p.m. I know that time because I'd glanced at the clock on the hospital wall 17 seconds before the monitor beside me screamed its flat, unbroken alarm. A Philips IntelliView MX800. I know the model now because I asked the nurse afterward. At the time, I just remember the green line going horizontal. One long, merciless green line. And the nurse, her name was Maria. I'd learned that later too. Spinning around from the medication cart and slamming the red call button on the wall with the heel of her palm. I had been admitted for what they called a routine cardiac observation. Chest pains, fatigue. I was 38 years old. I ran half marathons. I ate well. I was the last person anyone expected to die that night. But death doesn't negotiate with your expectations. I heard Dr. Richardson's voice before I saw him burst through the door. Commanding, controlled, terrifying in its calm. V-fib, get the cart, now. Ventricular fibrillation. My heart had stopped firing in any organized rhythm. It had become electrical chaos. And then it had become nothing at all. Here's what they don't tell you about dying. It doesn't hurt. The chest pain I'd felt for 3 days, the pressure, the burning behind my sternum, all of it vanished in an instant. Like someone reached into my body and simply turned off the signal. One moment I was gripping the bed rail, teeth clenched, and the next, peace. Not the peace of sleep. Something bigger, deeper. Peace with weight to it. Like being submerged in warm water that somehow let you breathe. And then I realized I was looking down at myself. I was above the bed, not floating dramatically, not flying, just there, near the ceiling, as naturally as if I'd always belonged there. I watched Maria pull the crash cart. I watched Dr. Richardson, young, sharper than I'd imagined, tear open my gown and press 2 paddles to my chest. I watched my own body convulse when 200 joules of electricity fired through it. My arms jerked, my back arched, and I felt nothing, because I was not in that body anymore. Clear! Again, 300 joules. My body jumped like a marionette. From above, I noticed something strange, something impossible. A green coffee stain in the left breast pocket of Nurse Maria's scrubs. A smear the size of a thumbprint. I remember thinking, in that detached, crystal-clear state of awareness, she must have spilled it this morning and didn't notice. I registered it the way you register a detail in a photograph. Perfectly. Permanently. I was clinically dead for 12 minutes and 19 seconds. I know this because Dr. Richardson documented it. 12 minutes and 19 seconds without a beating heart. Without oxygenated blood reaching my brain. By every medical standard known to science, I should have woken up, if I woke up, with catastrophic neurological damage. Unable to speak, unable to remember my own name. Instead, I woke up reciting the conversation Dr. Chen had outside my room, word for word. But that comes later. In that moment, floating above my own dying body, watching the team fight for a life I had already left, I wasn't afraid. I was curious. And underneath the curiosity was something else, something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I felt known, as if something, someone, just beyond the edges of the room was already aware of me, already waiting. And then I saw it, at the far wall of that hospital room, past the monitors, past the crash cart, past the 3 people trying to restart my heart. A tunnel opened. Not a hole in the wall, not a tear in the ceiling. It simply appeared, the way dawn appears, gradually and then all at once. A corridor of light that had no visible source, warm and golden and ancient feeling, stretching into a distance that shouldn't have existed inside a room that size. And I knew. I knew with a certainty that bypassed logic and went straight to the core of me. My life on Earth was over, but my journey had just begun. Before I moved toward the tunnel, I heard a single word, not spoken by any doctor, not spoken by any nurse. A word whispered from inside the light itself. A word in a language I had never studied, had never heard before in my life. I didn't know what it meant then. I wouldn't understand it until the very last room, the 7th room. And when I finally understood it, I begged to come back. I want you to understand something before I describe what happened next. I am not a mystic. I am not a poet. I am not someone who spent their life chasing spiritual experiences or reading books about the afterlife. Before that Tuesday night in March, I was an engineer, a numbers person, a man who believed in what he could measure, what he could test, what he could prove. If you couldn't put it in a spreadsheet or replicate it in a laboratory, I wasn't interested. So when I tell you what I experienced leaving my body, I need you to know that I am the last person who wanted this to be real. I was still near the ceiling, still watching. The room below me was controlled chaos. Dr. Richardson had called for epinephrine. I watched him draw it into a syringe with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. He injected it directly into my IV line, not my chest. I want to be precise, because precision matters to me. It always has. And then he turned back to the paddles. A third shock. 360 joules this time. Maximum power. My body convulsed so violently that my left arm swung off the bed rail, and Maria caught it and pressed it back down with both hands, her face tight, her jaw set. The green coffee stain on her pocket caught the fluorescent light. The monitors stayed flat. And somewhere in the hallway outside my room, I heard, clearly, as if I were standing right beside them, Dr. Chen say to someone, "Get the family. He's not responding." I heard that. From inside a sealed room, above the sound of the crash cart, above the beeping and the voices. I heard it the way you hear something in a dream that feels more real than waking life. Perfectly. Completely. Filed away in my memory like a recording. And then I felt it. The pull. Not physical. There was no physical anymore. This was something deeper than physics. Imagine the feeling of being homesick, but instead of longing for a place you've been, you're longing for a place you've never consciously visited, and yet some part of you, the oldest part of you, remembers it. That pull. That magnetic, irresistible, soul-level pull. Coming from the tunnel. Coming from the light. But I didn't go immediately, because something stopped me. My daughter. She was in the waiting room down the hall. I saw her. And I don't know how to explain that except to say that in this state, walls were not barriers. Distance was not real. I was simply aware of her the way you're aware of your own heartbeat. She was sitting in a plastic orange chair, her knees pulled to her chest, her phone face down in her lap. She was wearing the blue hoodie she'd had since college, and she was crying. Not dramatically, not loudly, just silent tears running down her face, one after another, while she stared at the floor. Her name is Elise. She was 22 years old that night, and I want you to know, I have never loved anything on this earth the way I love that girl. I tried to go to her. I tried. I willed myself toward that waiting room with everything I had, but the pull from the tunnel was stronger. Stronger than anything I have ever resisted in my life. And there was something else, a knowing that came with it. A calm, wordless communication, like a thought that wasn't mine. She will be okay. She is not alone. You cannot stay here. Not a voice, not yet. Just knowing. And then I felt something I need to describe carefully, because it is unlike anything in human language. The moment I stopped fighting the pull and simply allowed it, the moment I surrendered to it, the peace I'd felt at the moment of death multiplied, exponentially. Every unit of fear or grief or resistance I had been holding dissolved in a single instant. It was as if my entire life, every anxiety, every regret, every sleepless night, every argument, every failure, had been a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten I was carrying it. And now, all of it, gone, lifted. In a single breath that wasn't even a breath, I was light, not luminous, weightless, unencumbered, free. And I was moving, not walking, not flying the way movies imagine it. I was simply transitioning. The hospital room receding behind me, the sounds fading, the beeping monitors becoming distant, then fainter, then a whisper, then nothing. And ahead of me, the tunnel expanding, breathing, alive with a warmth that I can only describe as the physical sensation of being welcomed. But here's what I need you to hear, right now, before we go any further. That feeling, that weightlessness, that release of every burden you have ever carried, you don't have to die to experience it. I know that now. I know it because Jesus told me something in one of those 7 rooms that I will share with you before this story is over. Something about how that peace, that weight being lifted, it's available here, now, on this side of eternity. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because in that moment, moving toward the mouth of the tunnel, I suddenly became aware of something that changed the quality of everything. I was not moving alone. Someone, something, was beside me. Not visible yet, not speaking, but present, the way a fire is present in a dark room even before you see the flame. You feel the warmth first. You feel the light changing. And something in the most primal chamber of your soul whispers, "Something great is here." I turned, and I couldn't see clearly yet, but I could feel it. And then the pull became irresistible. I was moving, faster now, toward something I couldn't see, toward something I couldn't name. The tunnel walls shimmered with a light that pulsed like breathing, like a living thing. And the warmth was becoming something more than warmth. It was becoming sound, becoming color, becoming a frequency that vibrated in whatever I was now, in this state without a body, without bones, without blood. I was moving toward eternity. And whatever was beside me, whoever was with me, they were taking me home. I didn't know it yet, but the presence beside me in that tunnel already knew my name. Not my first name, not the name on my birth certificate. My real name, the name I was given before I was born. And when he finally spoke it aloud, inside that first room, I shattered, completely, because it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, and somehow, I had always known it. I need to stop for just a moment. Before I describe what the tunnel was like, before I take you into that passage between this world and the next, I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it, really sit with it, before you keep listening. Have you ever stood at the edge of something enormous? The edge of an ocean, the rim of a canyon, the rooftop of a skyscraper at night, looking out over a city that doesn't know you exist? Have you ever felt that specific mixture of terror and wonder? That feeling that says you are very small and the universe is very large, and something about that is both frightening and magnificent. That's the closest earthly comparison I can offer, but even that falls short, by miles. The tunnel was not dark. I think that's what surprises people most when I describe it. We've been conditioned, by movies, by folklore, by 1,000 secondhand accounts, to imagine a dark tunnel with a light at the end. A long, shadowed corridor and a pinprick of brightness somewhere in the distance. That is not what I experienced. The tunnel was the light. Not lit by light, it was made of it. The walls, the floor beneath me, the curved ceiling above, all of it constructed from a luminescence I have no adequate word for. Not white, not golden, not the color of sunlight or candlelight or any light that has a source you can point to. It was living light. Light that breathed. Light that was aware of me, that responded to my presence the way water responds to a stone dropped into it, rippling outward, adjusting, receiving me. And it was warm. Not warm like a blanket or a fireplace. Warm like being loved. I know how that sounds. I know how impossible that sentence is to parse with the rational mind, but there is no other description. The warmth that came from that light was emotional before it was physical. It entered me, whatever I was now, in this state without a body, and it filled every hollow place I had ever carried, every loneliness, every wound, every corner of my interior life I had kept dark and locked and unexamined for decades. The light found all of it, and it stayed. I was moving through it at a speed I couldn't quantify. There was no wind, no resistance, no sensation of velocity, and yet I knew I was traveling vast distances in moments. The tunnel curved gently, like the inside of a nautilus shell, and with each curve the light intensified. Not painfully, not blindingly, but with the quality of something approaching, the way music gets louder as you walk toward its source, and with each step you can hear more instruments, more layers, more depth. And then the life review began. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for the way it happened. Not like a movie playing on a screen, not like a highlight reel, not even like memory as I'd always known it. It was total immersion, complete, simultaneous. As if every moment of my 38 years existed at once, all equally present, all equally real, and I was somehow large enough to contain all of it at the same time. I saw myself as a child, 5 years old, sitting at a kitchen table, and my mother was laughing at something I'd said, and the sound of her laugh was so real, so textured and specific and hers, that I wept. I hadn't heard that laugh in 11 years. She died when I was 27. And there it was, not a memory of the laugh, not an approximation. The actual laugh, the actual warmth of that kitchen, the actual smell of whatever she was cooking, all of it present and alive and devastating in its beauty. And then, without transition, without warning, I was watching myself at 19, saying something cruel to a girl I had dated briefly. I won't repeat what I said, but I felt it the way she had felt it. Not my own guilt, her pain, her specific, particular human pain, landing in her chest like a stone. And I understood, with a clarity that was almost unbearable, that words are not small things, that nothing we do to another person is a small thing. The review did not feel like judgment. That's what I need to tell you. It did not feel punitive. It felt instructional, as if something, someone, was showing me my life not to condemn me, but to prepare me, to give me a context I hadn't had while living it, to let me see the full weight and the full beauty of a single human life, my human life, before I arrived at what was waiting at the end of the tunnel. I saw moments I had forgotten entirely, small ones. A morning I'd held a door open for an elderly man, and he'd touched my arm and said, "Thank you, son." And I'd felt something warm and hadn't known what it was. I knew now. I saw arguments that I'd been certain I was right about, and I watched them play from every angle, every perspective, and I understood how wrong I had been. Not in a crushing way, but in the way of a student who finally grasps a theorem they've struggled with for years. Oh, of course. Now I see it. And woven through all of it, through every scene, every moment, every flash of my 38 years, was a thread. A single, continuous, golden thread that I hadn't noticed while I was living, but that was unmistakable from this vantage point. I had never been alone. Not once. not for a single moment of my entire life. There had always been a presence, quiet, unobtrusive, respectful of my choices, even the terrible ones. Never forcing, never demanding. But there, the way a lighthouse is there, not chasing the ships, just burning, just shining, just being available for anyone lost enough to look up. I had looked away my entire life, and still, the light had stayed on. I'm not ashamed to tell you that I wept in that tunnel. Without eyes, without tears, without a body, and yet I wept, in whatever way a soul weeps, with everything I had. Not from sadness exactly, from something more complex than sadness. From the recognition of a love so patient, so persistent, so fierce in its gentleness, that it had followed me through 38 years of indifference and never once turned away. Do you feel that right now? That tightness in your chest as you listen to this? That thing stirring in you that you can't quite name? That's not me. That's not this story. That's a reminder. From something older and truer than both of us. Your soul already knows what I'm describing. It recognizes it. It has been waiting for you to stop long enough to listen. Don't rush past this moment, please. The tunnel began to change. The curves straightened. The light ahead concentrated, gathered itself. The way clouds gather before a storm, except the opposite of a storm. A gathering of peace, of arrival. The warmth became almost tangible, almost solid, like walking into a room where something extraordinary has just happened, and the air is still charged with it. And the sound began. I hadn't noticed the silence of the tunnel until it ended, and what ended it was not noise. It was music. But calling it music is like calling the ocean a puddle. It was harmonic, layered, built from voices, thousands of voices, maybe millions. I cannot give you a number. And every voice was singing something different, and yet together they formed a single, unified sound that was not a song so much as a statement, a declaration, an announcement that something was near that deserved every voice in the universe singing at full capacity just to begin to honor it. I understood the music without knowing the words. It said, "He is here. He has always been here. And he has been waiting for you." The tunnel opened, not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like a door thrown wide by someone who has been waiting on the other side of it for a very, very long time. And what I saw shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. In the final seconds of the tunnel, just before it opened completely, I saw something that made no sense to me then. Written in the light itself, not carved, not painted, but woven into the luminescence like a watermark, were 7 doors. 7 distinct doors, each one different, each one sealed. And standing before all 7 of them was a figure I wasn't yet close enough to see clearly. But even from that distance, even without seeing his face, I felt his eyes find mine. And I heard a single sentence, not spoken aloud, but deposited directly into the center of my soul. "I have been saving the last room for you." There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. The birth of a child, the loss of a parent, the day a diagnosis changes the shape of your future. These are the fault lines of a human life, the moments where the ground shifts permanently, and nothing on the other side of them looks quite the same as it did before. What I stepped into when that tunnel opened was not a moment like those. It was something so categorically different from anything I had ever experienced, or could have imagined experiencing, that the word moment doesn't apply. It wasn't a point in time, it was an arrival. Like the difference between seeing a photograph of the ocean and actually standing at its edge with the water rushing over your feet for the first time, and understanding in your body that the ocean is not an image, it is a fact, ancient, vast, utterly indifferent to whether you believed in it before you got there. Heaven is a fact. I am staking everything, my reputation, my sanity, the rest of my life, on that statement. Heaven is a fact. The first thing that hit me was the light. Not hit, received me, enveloped me. The light of heaven didn't illuminate the way sunlight illuminates, casting shadows, creating contrast, defining edges. This light eliminated the concept of shadow entirely, not because it was blinding, but because it was complete. It came from everywhere simultaneously, from the ground, from the air, from the distance, from within things. Every blade of grass, every petal, every stone, everything radiated its own gentle luminescence, as if the light wasn't falling on creation, but was emanating from it. As if every created thing was made partly of light, and had simply been waiting to show you. And the colors. I need you to understand that I'm about to fail you with language. I know I'm going to fail you, and I'm asking for your grace in advance. Because what I saw in terms of color in heaven cannot be communicated in human vocabulary, for the simple reason that human vocabulary was built to describe a world with a certain spectrum, red to violet, the colors our eyes were designed to detect. Heaven operates outside that spectrum. Not just more vivid versions of colors I knew, not just deeper blues or more saturated greens, but colors that have no names, colors that my earthly eyes had no receptor for, that my earthly brain had no category for, and that I was only able to perceive because I was no longer limited to earthly eyes or an earthly brain. I saw colors that made me feel things, not colors that were beautiful and therefore produced emotion. Colors that were emotions. A shade, I'll call it a shade, though that word is entirely inadequate. A shade that simply was peace. Not the color of something peaceful. Peace itself, rendered visible. Another, and this one undid me, a color that was love. Not symbolic of love, not associated with love. Love, given a visual frequency, made seeable, filling a portion of the sky above me like a sunrise that had never occurred on earth and never would. I stood in it. I breathed it. I became it, at least partially. Beneath my feet, and I had feet, I had a form. Not my earthly body, but something that felt more like my actual self than my physical body ever had. Beneath my feet was grass. I know how ordinary that sounds. Grass. But this grass. Each blade was individually luminous, a green so alive it seemed to hum with intention. And when I knelt, I don't know why I knelt, it just seemed right. It seemed like the only appropriate response to something so achingly beautiful. When I knelt and pressed my palm to it, the sensation traveled up through my hand and through my arm and into my chest, and I can only describe it as the feeling of being genuinely, completely, unconditionally welcomed. Not tolerated, not merely permitted, celebrated. As if the ground itself knew I had arrived and was glad. The grass was softer than anything I have touched in my earthly life. Softer than silk, softer than water. It yielded beneath my fingers like something alive and responsive, and where I touched it, it seemed to lean gently toward my hand the way a child leans toward a parent's touch. I wept again. I wept constantly in heaven, but not from sadness. Understand that. The tears of heaven are the tears of someone seeing home for the first time after believing for years that they had none. The air. Oh, the air of heaven. On earth, we breathe air. We don't taste it, don't experience it as a thing unto itself. It's simply the medium we move through, functional and unremarkable. The air of heaven was none of those things. Breathing it was an event. Each breath carried fragrance. Not a single fragrance, but layered, complex, alive. Something like every flower that has ever bloomed distilled into a single breath, combined with something else underneath it. Something sweeter than honey, something ancient and clean and indescribable that made each inhale feel like drinking from a source you had been thirsty for your entire life without knowing it. And with each breath, something happened internally. Fear, any residual fear I'd carried into that place, dissolved. Not suppressed, not managed, dissolved, as though it had never been a real thing. As though fear was a condition specific to a world that operated under limitations. And here, beyond those limitations, it simply had no mechanism to exist. I breathed and I was fearless. I breathed again and I was joyful. Not the thin, fragile, circumstantial joy of earthly good days, but a joy with structural integrity. A joy that felt load-bearing. A joy that could hold the weight of anything. Ahead of me a river, crystal, moving, alive with the same inner light as everything else. But in the river, the light danced. It caught and refracted and sang. Yes, sang, because the river had a sound. And the sound was musical, genuinely musical. A continuous harmonic note that shifted and evolved as the water moved. As if the river were a living instrument playing a song composed specifically for this moment, for my arrival, for me. I walked toward it, and along its banks, flowers. Gardens of impossible construction. Flowers in colors that don't exist in earthly botany, with petals that moved not in wind, but in response to some interior rhythm, opening and closing gently, like the breathing of sleeping children. Their fragrance reached me from 100 yards away and intensified with each step. Not overwhelming, never overwhelming, but building like a crescendo, like the moment in a symphony when every instrument finally plays together, and the sum of them is something none of them could have been alone. And beyond the gardens, in the middle distance, structures, buildings, though that word diminishes them. Architecture that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed on it. Towers that caught the impossible light and refracted it into colors. Those colors, the ones without names, in all directions. Pathways of a material that looked like gold, but behaved like it was alive, shifting slightly underfoot, warm, responsive, joyful in the way that all of heaven seemed joyful, as if the very substance of this place had been created in a moment of cosmic delight and had never forgotten it. And the sound, the music I had first heard at the end of the tunnel was here in full expression. Voices, beyond counting, beyond imagining, in worship. Not the restrained, self-conscious worship of earthly churches, not the performance of religion. Something raw and enormous and free. Worship that had shed every inhibition and every pretension and every audience awareness and was simply, purely, ecstatically directed at a single source, a single being, whose presence I could feel intensifying with every step I took deeper into this place. He was here. I knew it before I saw him. The way you know thunder is coming before you hear it. You feel it first, in the ground, in your chest, in the fillings of your teeth. His presence moved through heaven the way electricity moves through air before a lightning strike. Everything became more itself in proximity to him. The colors deepened, the music swelled. The light gathered and concentrated and moved, intentionally moved, toward a single point ahead of me, and then I saw them. 7 doors, exactly as I had glimpsed them in the tunnel. 7 distinct doors, set into nothing, standing in an open landscape with no walls to contain them, and yet each one solid, ancient, real, more architecturally present than any structure I had ever encountered on Earth. Each one different. The first, simple wood, worn smooth by what looked like centuries of hands. The second, iron, etched with symbols I couldn't read but somehow understood emotionally. They spoke of justice, of truth. The third, carved from something that looked like alabaster, translucent, with light moving inside it like a living thing. The fourth, covered in what appeared to be living vines, bearing fruit that glowed softly gold. The fifth, I couldn't look at it long. Its light was the most concentrated of all. The sixth, simple, quiet, almost humble in comparison. And the seventh door was different from all the others. It had no handle, no visible mechanism for opening, just a surface, smooth, dark, and somehow expectant, as if it had been waiting, as if it had been made for a specific moment that had not yet arrived. And standing before all seven of them, facing me, with the entirety of heaven singing behind him, he spoke. Not loudly. He didn't need to be loud. His voice, even in those first two words, was simultaneously the most gentle and the most powerful thing I have ever heard. Thunder distilled into a whisper with the structural force of a mountain. Two words. My name. My real name. Not the name my parents gave me, the name I was given before I existed, the name that contained my entire identity, my entire purpose, the full weight of what I was made to be, compressed into a sound I had never heard before, and yet recognized with every particle of whatever I was. He said my name, and everything changed. What I didn't know, standing there before those seven doors with Jesus looking at me, was that someone was in that place who I had not expected to see, someone whose presence in heaven I had considered impossible, someone whose face, when I saw it, broke me and rebuilt me in the same instant. I'll tell you who it was, but first, I need to tell you what Jesus showed me inside those rooms, because what he showed me changes everything, for you, for all of us, right now, in this year. He was not what I expected. I need to say that first, before anything else, because I think it matters, especially for those of you who have spent your lives building a mental image of Jesus from paintings, from movies, from Sunday school felt boards, from the stained glass windows of churches you may or may not have believed in. The Jesus I encountered in heaven did not match any image I had ever seen, not even close. He was not pale. He was not distant. He was not the serene, untouchable figure of religious art, composed, symmetrical, holding a lamb with an expression of mild benevolence. He was not a symbol. He was not a concept. He was not a theological proposition waiting to be debated. He was alive, ferociously, overwhelmingly, cosmically alive. More alive than anything I had ever encountered. More alive than the grass and the river and the impossible colors of heaven combined. Because all of those things derived their life from him. He was the source. Standing before him, I understood instinctively what a candle understands about the sun. Not diminished by the comparison, but clarified by it. Shown what it was always meant to be in relation to. His form was human, recognizably, comfortingly human, and yet simultaneously, I don't have language for this, more than human, the way an ocean is more than wet. Human the way a symphony is music, technically accurate as a category, and yet exploding every expectation of what that category contains. His eyes. I have to tell you about his eyes. They were not one color. They contained, I am choosing this word carefully, everything. I looked into them and I saw depth without floor. I saw ancient light. I saw the specific, particular, individual knowledge of every human being who had ever lived. Billions of faces, billions of stories, held simultaneously in a gaze that nonetheless managed to be completely, exclusively, entirely focused on me. On me alone, as if I were the only person in all of creation. As if he had been waiting for specifically this moment, with specifically me, and nothing else existed or mattered in comparison. They held galaxies, those eyes. Literal galaxies, swirling, luminous, vast. And they held sorrow, a sorrow so deep and so long endured that it recontextualized everything I had ever understood about suffering. He had felt it all. Every human pain, every abandonment, every addiction, every war, every child crying in the dark. He had felt it, not observed it, felt it. And he was still here, still standing, still loving, with a love that had not been diminished by a single particle, despite absorbing the full weight of human history. And they held, most devastatingly of all, joy. Joy at seeing me, the man who had spent 38 years treating his existence as a hypothesis not worth investigating. The man who had mocked believers at dinner parties. The man who had, on at least 3 specific occasions I could now see playing in the background of his eyes, looked at the sky and said out loud, "If you're real, prove it." He was proving it now, and he was glad. He reached out his hand, and I saw the scar. I wasn't prepared for the scar. I had known, intellectually, the theology of it: crucifixion, nails, sacrifice. I had filed that information in the part of my brain reserved for ancient history and comparative mythology. But seeing it, seeing the actual, physical, permanent mark in the hand of the being before me, the mark that was not an accident or a wound healed imperfectly, but a chosen scar, a scar he had kept, a scar he would carry for eternity because he wanted to, because it was the evidence of a love he refused to let be forgotten. I collapsed. There is no other word for it. Whatever held me upright simply gave way. I was on my knees in the grass of heaven, in front of the Son of God, and I was not performing humility or expressing theology. I was simply broken open by the reality of what I was seeing. Broken open the way a seed breaks open to become what it was always meant to be. He knelt beside me, the King of the universe, the one whose voice the Gospel of John says spoke the cosmos into existence, the one before whom I now understood with absolute certainty every knee would one day bow. He knelt beside me in the grass, and he put his scarred hand on my shoulder, and he said, "I know everything you have done. I know every dark corner. I know every secret. I know every lie, every wound you caused, every moment you chose yourself over everyone else. I know all of it." He paused, and then, "And I am here. I knelt beside you in the grass. Does that answer your question?" The question I had thrown at the sky 3 times. If you're real, prove it. He had heard every single one. I wept with a totality I did not know was possible, and he held me, the way a father holds a child who has been lost and is finally found. And he let me weep, and he did not rush it, and he did not make me feel small for it. He made me feel found. After a time moved differently there. I cannot tell you how long. He stood, and he extended his hand again, this time not in comfort, but in invitation. He gestured toward the 7 doors, and he smiled. And in that smile was every sunrise that had ever happened, every reunion that had ever occurred between people who loved each other and thought they'd never meet again. "Walk with me," he said. "I have things to show you." The first room, the room of origins. The first door, the simple wooden one, worn smooth, swung open at his approach without being touched. Inside was light, soft, warm, intimate light. And in the light, me. Not as I was at 38, not as a child, but as something pre-physical, a soul, luminous and complete, before it ever entered a body, before it ever drew a breath on earth. And Jesus stood beside that luminous version of me and said, "Before your mother knew she was pregnant, before the cells divided, before the first heartbeat, I knew you. I designed you. Every capacity you have, every gift, every inclination toward beauty and logic and love, I placed those in you deliberately. You were not an accident. You were not a product of chance. You were a specific intention." I watched him form me, I watched the care of it, the attention, the delight, and I understood that I had spent 38 years treating my existence as a cosmic accident, which was not only theologically wrong, but personally insulting to the being who had poured himself into making me. I wept again, sensing a pattern. The second room, the room of wounds. The iron door, etched with symbols of justice and truth. This room held every wound I had ever received, every cruelty inflicted on me, from childhood forward. Every moment of abandonment, betrayal, humiliation, loss. They were all there, visible, real, not sanitized or softened. And beside each wound, beside each one, without exception, was a figure. The same figure. Jesus. There, in every scene. Not preventing it, I had questions about that, and he answered them quietly. I do not override human will, but I am never absent. In every scene of my suffering, he was present, weeping with me, holding what I couldn't hold, absorbing what would have destroyed me entirely if he hadn't been bearing part of the weight I couldn't see him bearing. You thought you survived those things alone, he said. You never did, not once. I thought of the people watching this right now, who are carrying wounds they believe no one knows about, no one sees, no one cares about. He sees them. He is in them, in those wounds right now, bearing weight you don't know he's bearing. The third room, the room of choices. The alabaster door, translucent, light moving inside it. This room was the hardest. Every significant choice I had ever made played before me. Not just the obviously terrible ones, but the quietly destructive ones. The moments I chose pride over reconciliation. The times I chose comfort over courage. The relationships I had slowly dismantled through consistent small selfishnesses. The moments when I had felt the pull towards something true and good, and had turned away because it cost too much. I wanted to look away. Jesus put his hand on my arm. I'm not showing you this to condemn you, he said. I'm showing you this because every single one of these choices, the ones that hurt others, the ones that cost them, every one of them is covered. If you receive what I did for you, not excused, not pretended away, covered, paid for, by me, by the cross, by those scars you saw on my hands. He turned to face me fully. The question is not whether you deserve forgiveness. You don't. No one does. The question is whether you will receive it. I received it. In that room, on my knees again, I received it like a man dying of thirst receives water. Desperately, gratefully, completely. The fourth room, the room of love. The door with living vines and glowing fruit. This room had no review, no revelation of the past. It was simply love. Pure, concentrated, inexhaustible love. The love of God, made somehow visible and inhabitable, so that I walked into it the way you walk into a warm room from winter cold, and every cell of whatever I was became saturated with it. Jesus stood in the center of this room and said nothing for what felt like a very long time. He didn't need to speak. The room spoke. And what it said, in the language of pure experience rather than words, this is what I made you for. This is your origin and your destination. This is the answer to every question you have ever asked about why you exist and whether it means anything. This, right here, is the meaning. To be loved like this, and to love in return. That's it. That's the whole answer. I thought of every person on earth, every atheist, every agnostic, every person of every religion and no religion. Every human being who had ever asked in the dark, does anyone love me? Does my life matter? Is there any point to any of this? I wanted to reach through the fabric of reality and pull every single one of them into this room. Jesus looked at me. That's exactly why I'm sending you back, he said, as if he'd heard the thought. Tell them about this room. Tell them this love is available right now. Tell them it's not earned, and it's not conditional, and it has no expiration date. Tell them I am waiting. The fifth room, the room of eternity. The door whose light was too concentrated to look at directly. I will be honest, this room I can describe least. Not because nothing happened, but because what happened exceeded the capacity of even this enhanced state of consciousness I was in to fully process. What I can tell you is this: I understood time differently. I understood that what we call life, those brief decades on Earth, is not the main event. It is the introduction, the first sentence of a story that has no final page. And the choices made in that introduction reverberate through an eternity that makes the longest human life look like a single heartbeat. Jesus said, "People live as if Earth is everything and eternity is a rumor. I need you to go back and tell them it's the other way around. Eternity is the reality. Earth is the preparation. And the preparation is almost over." He said that last sentence with an urgency that I felt in whatever constituted my bones. The preparation is almost over. I'm going to tell you what he meant by that, but not yet. That belongs to chapter 7. The sixth room, the room of purpose. The quiet door, the humble one. This room showed me, specifically, individually, precisely, why I was made, what I was designed to contribute, the specific shape of my calling, fitted to my specific gifts, aimed at specific people who needed what only I, in my particular combination of experience and capacity and history, could offer them. And Jesus said something in this room that I believe he says to every human being who has ever lived. You are not made to be a spectator of other people's purposes. You are made for something specific, something irreplaceable. And every day you spend living below that purpose, not because you failed, but because you never tried, is a day the world is missing something it needs. He looked at me. You have been living below your purpose for 38 years. I'm giving you more time. Don't waste it. The seventh room. Jesus stopped before the final door, the one with no handle, the smooth, dark, expectant surface. He turned to me, and for the first time since I had arrived, his expression was different. Not less loving, never less loving, but weighted, carrying something enormous, something he was about to entrust to me, and the trust of it was something he did not take lightly. This room, he said slowly, is the reason I brought you here specifically. Not every person who comes to heaven sees this room. This room is for those I am sending back, for those with a message. He placed his hand on the door, and it opened. Inside was not a vision of heaven. It was a vision of earth. But not earth as it was, earth as it was becoming. I saw it clearly. A world accelerating toward a moment of decision. A world in which the distractions had multiplied, and the noise had intensified, and the distance between human beings and the truth had grown wider, precisely because the time had grown shorter. A world in which millions of people were one conversation away from the love I had just experienced in the fourth room. And yet we're not having that conversation because no one was telling them. And Jesus pointed into that vision and said, "This is why you go back, not for yourself, for them. Every person you tell, every soul that hears your story and turns toward me. That is why I gave you 12 minutes and 19 seconds. That is why I am giving you the rest of your life." He turned to face me one final time. His eyes, galaxies, sorrow, joy, love, found mine. Go back. Tell them I am. Tell them I am not a religion or a ritual or a rule system. Tell them I am a person who loves them with a love that survived the cross. Tell them heaven is real. Tell them hell is real. Tell them the choice is real. And tell them specifically, that I am not angry. I am waiting. I have been waiting a long time, and I will keep waiting, but the door will not stay open forever. He reached out and touched my forehead, and then the word. The word I had heard whispered at the tunnel's entrance. The one in the language I didn't recognize. The one I'd carried through all 7 rooms without understanding. He spoke it now, clearly, fully, with the weight of all its meaning behind it. I understood it, and it shattered me. I will tell you what it means in the final chapter, because you need the context of everything that came before to carry the full weight of it. But I promise you, it is the most important word I have ever heard, and it is meant for you. Then, light. Blinding, total, absolute light. And I was back. When I woke up, gasping, heart restarting, pain crashing back into my chest like a wave, the first thing I did was say a name. Not my own, not a doctor's name. The name of the person I had seen in heaven. The person whose presence there I had considered impossible. And when I said that name out loud in that hospital room, Dr. Richardson stopped, went completely still, and looked at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Because he knew that name. And there was no way, no earthly, clinical, rational way, that I should have. Pain. That was the first thing. Not light, not sound, not the gradual, gentle re-entry you might imagine. Some soft dissolving of heaven into wakefulness, some tender transition between worlds. No, it was pain. Immediate, total, unambiguous pain. Like being pulled from warm water and thrown onto concrete. Like every nerve ending in my body simultaneously remembering that it existed and had opinions about it. My chest, it felt like someone had parked a car on it. The defibrillation, 3 shocks at escalating voltage, had left bruising across my sternum that I would feel for 3 weeks. My throat burned from the intubation tube they'd placed while I was gone. My left arm, the one that had swung off the bed rail, ached from shoulder to fingertip. My mouth was dry with the specific chemical dryness of resuscitation drugs. Epinephrine, amiodarone, the cocktail they'd pushed through my IV trying to restart what had stopped. I was back in my body, and my body was furious about everything that had happened to it in the last 12 minutes and 19 seconds. But underneath the pain, underneath it, deeper than the physical, more foundational than anything my nervous system was screaming at me, was something that the pain could not touch, could not reach, could not diminish by a single degree. The peace from the 4th room. It had come back with me. I heard myself before I was fully conscious. A sound, raw, involuntary, somewhere between a gasp and a sob, tore out of my chest as my heart restarted and my lungs remembered their function. I heard it from somewhere slightly outside myself, as if the transition from that state to this one wasn't yet fully complete, as if some part of me was still hovering, still bridging both worlds. And then voices. He's back. Sinus rhythm. We have sinus rhythm. Dr. Richardson. Controlled as ever, but with something underneath the control now. A fracture in the professional composure. A hairline crack of something that sounded almost like disbelief. Like a man who had done this procedure many times and had not expected it to work this time. Get his vitals. Someone call the family. Maria. Her voice. I recognized it immediately, though I had technically never heard it while conscious. She was on my right side, adjusting something on the IV line, her movements efficient and practiced. And I could see, even through eyes that were barely open, barely functional, swimming with the blurred confusion of re-entry. I could see the green coffee stain on the left breast pocket of her scrubs, exactly where I had seen it from the ceiling, exactly the size and shape I had registered from above. I stared at it. I couldn't speak yet. My throat was too raw, my lungs too busy relearning their rhythm. But I stared at that stain with an intensity that must have looked strange, because Maria noticed and followed my gaze down to her pocket, and then looked back up at me with an expression of mild self-consciousness. "Sorry about that," she said quietly. Spilled my coffee this morning. Didn't notice until I was already here. I tried to nod. I'm not sure I succeeded. Dr. Richardson came into my field of vision. Young, sharper than I'd imagined. I had caught only glimpses from above. Dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a long shift. A small scar above his left eyebrow that I hadn't been able to see from the ceiling, but could see now. He leaned over me with a pen light, checking pupil response. His face professionally neutral, and yet carrying that fracture I had heard in his voice. That hairline crack of something unresolved. "Can you hear me?" he said. "Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." I squeezed. Good. You're okay. You're back." I tried to speak. The first attempt produced nothing. The second produced a sound like gravel in a blender. The third, with effort that cost me more than I expected, produced 2 words. A name. Not my name. Not his name. The name of the person I had seen in heaven. The person whose presence there I had considered impossible. The name that had broken and rebuilt me in the same instant when I'd seen their face in those luminous, impossible halls. I said the name. And Dr. Richardson stopped, completely still. The pen light frozen in his hand. The professional composure, not cracked now, shattered. He stared at me with an expression that I have replayed in my mind hundreds of times since that night, because it contained something I have never seen on a human face before or since. It was the expression of a man encountering something his entire framework of reality had no category for. Because the name I had said, the name that had come out of my ruined throat as the first coherent thing I uttered upon returning from the dead, was the name of his son who had died 14 months earlier, at 19 years old, in a car accident on a Tuesday night, not unlike the Tuesday night I was currently lying in this hospital bed fighting to breathe. His son, whom he had never mentioned to any patient, whose existence was private, whose death was something he carried in the fracture lines of his composure on every shift. Because grief doesn't observe professional boundaries, no matter how hard you train yourself. His son, whose name I had no mechanism to know. Dr. Richardson sat down. Actually sat down, pulled a chair to the edge of my bed and sat down, which I would later learn he had never done with a patient before. And he said, very quietly, with a voice that was no longer the voice of a physician, "How do you know that name?" I told him, as best I could, with a throat that was barely working and lungs that were still negotiating their re-involvement. I told him. His son was in heaven. I had seen him. He was luminous, joyful, whole. Not the broken body from a Tuesday night collision, but the full, complete, true version of him. The version that persisted beyond the accident, beyond the death, beyond the grief that his father carried into every room of this hospital, on every shift. He was home, and he had a message for his father. I related word for word. I won't share the specific content here because it was private. It was his, meant for Dr. Richardson's ears and heart alone. But I will tell you that by the time I finished, the physician who had restarted my heart 40 minutes earlier was weeping without any attempt to conceal it. Weeping in the unguarded, helpless way of someone who has been carrying an unbearable weight and has just had it unexpectedly lifted by the last possible source they would have predicted. He gripped my hand. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, I stopped believing. After he died, I just stopped. I looked at him, my throat still raw, my chest still bruised, my eyes still adjusting to the fluorescent harshness of a world that would never look quite the same after where I had just been. And I said, with every particle of certainty I had brought back from those 7 rooms, "He knew. Your son knew you stopped, and he wanted me to tell you. He's still there. Jesus is still there, and so is your son, and neither of them has stopped believing in you." Dr. Richardson bowed his head, and somewhere in that hospital room, in the space between a doctor's grief and a dead man's testimony, something shifted. Some invisible door, perhaps the first of many, opened just enough to let light through. Over the next 48 hours, the verifications accumulated. I described the conversation Dr. Chen had in the hallway outside my room, the exact words, the exact phrasing. Dr. Chen went pale. He asked me twice how I could have heard it through a closed door over the noise of the crash cart. I told him I hadn't heard it through the door. I had heard it while standing in the hallway beside him, invisible, unencumbered by walls or distance or the limitations of a body that was currently flatlining. He wrote it in his notes. Patient reported auditory perception of external conversation during code blue. Accuracy confirmed. No clinical explanation available. I described the crack in the ceiling tile, a specific crack, third tile from the left in the corner above my bed, shaped roughly like a river delta, branching into 3 smaller fissures toward the far edge. The facilities manager confirmed it the next morning. He'd been meaning to replace that tile for 2 months. I described the waiting room, the plastic orange chairs, Elise in her blue college hoodie, knees pulled to her chest, phone face down in her lap, silent tears. When she came in to see me that morning, puffy-eyed, exhausted, still in the hoodie, I described it to her before she could speak. She stood in the doorway and pressed her hand over her mouth. "You saw me?" she whispered. "You were never alone," I told her. "Not for a single second. I need you to know that, and neither are you, ever." She crawled into the chair beside my bed and held my hand for 6 hours without speaking. And that silence was the most communicative 6 hours of our relationship. The neurologist came on day 2. Dr. Anand. Methodical, precise. The kind of physician who trusts data the way I used to trust data, who finds comfort in the predictability of clinical outcomes. He ran the full battery: cognitive assessments, reflexes, language processing, memory recall, spatial reasoning. He checked my EEG. He reviewed the timeline. 12 minutes and 19 seconds of clinical death. No heartbeat. No oxygenated blood to the brain. He sat across from me when it was done. "By every clinical metric," he said carefully, "you should have sustained significant hypoxic brain injury, memory loss, cognitive impairment, motor deficits, at minimum." He paused, looked at his tablet, looked at me. "You have none of those things. Your cognition is, frankly, it's sharper than the baseline we'd expect for a patient your age in normal circumstances. Your memory recall is extraordinary. Your language processing is completely intact." Another pause. "I don't have an explanation for this." I nodded. "I do," I said, "but it's going to require you to expand your framework." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "And this is the thing about what I brought back, the thing I'm still in awe of. It doesn't only affect the people who hear the whole story. Sometimes it just takes a sentence, a detail, a crack in the wall of certainty, and the light comes through." Very quietly, Dr. Anand said, "I'm listening." I was discharged on day 4. Walking out of that hospital was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. A life that had recently included visiting heaven and speaking with Jesus, which recalibrates your definition of surreal significantly. The automatic doors slid open and the outdoor air hit me. Cold, thin, smelling of exhaust and coming rain. And after the air of heaven, it was almost painful in its ordinariness. Almost. But I had brought something back with me that transformed even that ordinary air. That peace. The load-bearing, structural, inexhaustible peace from the 4th room was still present, still resident in me like a furnace whose pilot light cannot be extinguished. The world looked the same. The parking lot, the gray February sky, Elise's car idling at the curb with the heater on. The same, and yet entirely different. Because I knew now what I hadn't known when I walked into that hospital 3 days earlier. I knew what was real. I knew what mattered. I knew what was waiting. For every human being who drew breath, on the other side of the appointment none of us can cancel. And I knew, with the certainty of a man who had been there, who had stood in the grass and breathed the air and wept in the fourth room and walked through all 7 doors with the King of the universe beside him. I knew that the message I had been given was not for me alone. It was for you. It has always been for you. I was alive. My heart was beating. 72 beats per minute, the cardiologist had confirmed. Perfectly regular. No residual arrhythmia. As if the episode had been entirely erased from my cardiac history. I was breathing. I was standing in a hospital parking lot in February with cold air in my lungs and my daughter waiting at the curb. But I was no longer the same man who had been admitted. That man was gone. Left behind in a hospital room at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, along with the flat green line on the Philips IntelliView MX800, along with 38 years of certainty that the universe was mechanical and meaning was manufactured, and death was the end of the story. The man standing in this parking lot had been to heaven, had walked through 7 rooms, had heard his real name spoken by the mouth of Jesus, had a mission, a message, a burning, urgent, non-negotiable compulsion to find every person who would listen and tell them what he had seen. I had a mission. And this video, you, watching this right now, this is part of it. I promised you the word whispered at the tunnel's entrance, the word Jesus spoke in the 7th room, in the language I had never learned, that shattered and rebuilt me. I have kept that promise waiting through 6 chapters because I needed you to understand everything else first. Because without the context of the 7 rooms, without the wounds and the choices and the love and the eternity and the purpose, the word is just a sound. With all of it, it is the answer to the question every human being has ever asked in their darkest moment. I will tell you in the final chapter, and I believe, with everything I brought back from those 12 minutes and 19 seconds, that it will change you. I've been sitting with how to begin this final chapter for a long time, not because I don't know what to say. I have never been more certain of anything I have ever said in my life than what I'm about to say to you now. But because I am aware, deeply, painfully aware, that you are sitting on the other side of this story, and I don't know who you are. I don't know what you've been through. I don't know what you believe, or what broke your belief, or whether you ever had any to begin with. I don't know if you're watching this at noon on a Tuesday with a cup of coffee, or at 3 a.m. because sleep won't come and something you can't name, led you here. But I know this. You are not here by accident. I said that at the beginning, and I need to say it again now, at the end, with the full weight of everything between those 2 statements behind it. Jesus told me, specifically in the 7th room, standing before a vision of a world accelerating toward its moment of decision, that the people who would hear this story were not random, that the algorithm and the suggestion and the idle click and the sleepless night and whatever chain of events brought you to this video were not coincidences assembling themselves by chance. He brought you here. He has been trying to reach you. And this, right now, this moment, is one of the ways he reaches people. Through the testimony of someone who went where you haven't gone yet and came back with a report. I am that person, and I have a report. My life now. It has been 2 years and 4 months since I flatlined at 11:47 p.m. in that hospital room. 2 years and 4 months since Dr. Richardson restarted my heart with 360 joules on the 3rd attempt. 2 years and 4 months since I walked through 7 doors in heaven with the Son of God beside me. Let me tell you what is different. The fear is gone. Not managed, not medicated, not suppressed through willpower or distraction or the careful construction of a life designed to avoid confronting mortality. Gone. removed as cleanly and completely as a splinter drawn from skin. I am 38, 40 years old now, and I think about death every single day, and not once in 2 years and 4 months has that thought produced fear. Because I know what's there. I have been there. And what's there is not to be feared. What's there is home. I sleep differently. I used to lie awake cataloging failures, rehearsing arguments, running the calculations of a life measured in productivity and achievement, and the opinions of people whose names I've already half forgotten. Now I lie down and I am still. Not because nothing is hard. Plenty is hard. Not because nothing hurts. I have wept since returning, many times, real tears over real losses. But underneath every difficulty, sustaining me the way bedrock sustains a building, whether the building knows it or not, is that peace. The fourth room peace. The structural, load-bearing, inexhaustible peace that came back with me and is not weakened by a single degree in 2 years and 4 months. I love differently. Elise and I talk every day now. Every single day. Not because we scheduled it or decided to prioritize the relationship, because I cannot not talk to her. Because I stood at the edge of eternity and watched her crying in a plastic orange chair, and I was shown in the second room what every wound costs, and I understand now with a cellular certainty what matters and what does not, and she matters, and every conversation is a gift I did not earn and do not take for granted. I called people I had wronged, not as a therapeutic exercise, not to unburden myself at their expense, but because the third room had shown me the precise cost of every harm I had caused, and because Jesus had covered that cost with his own blood. And the least I could do in response to that covering was to go to the people and say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. You deserved better." Some of them received it. Some of them didn't. Both responses were okay. The point was not the reception. The point was the truth. I lost the ambition I used to carry. That sounds like a loss. It wasn't. The ambition I used to carry was the ambition of a man trying to justify his existence, trying to accumulate enough achievement to feel that his being here was warranted, that the space he occupied was earned. I don't need to justify my existence anymore. I know who made me and why. I know my real name. I know the specific, irreplaceable shape of my purpose. The old ambition, frantic, anxious, never satisfied, has been replaced by something quieter and infinitely more powerful. Direction. I know where I'm going. I know why I'm here. I know what I'm supposed to do with the time I have left, whether that's 40 more years or 40 more minutes. And what I'm supposed to do is tell you what I'm about to tell you. The Word. I promised you this. 6 chapters ago, I planted a seed about a word whispered at the entrance of the tunnel. A word in a language I had never studied, never heard, that I carried through all 7 rooms without understanding. A word that Jesus finally spoke aloud in the 7th room, with the full weight of its meaning released, that shattered and rebuilt me in the same instant. I need you to be present for this, not just listening, present. Because this word is not for the part of you that processes information and files it away. It's for the part of you that has been asking the same question since you were old enough to ask questions at all. The question that takes different forms in different seasons of life, but is always, underneath the different forms, the same question. Am I loved? Do I matter? Is there anyone who truly, fully, unconditionally knows me and chooses me anyway? That is the question. The universal human question. The one that drives every search for connection, every act of performance, every addiction, every achievement, every desperate attempt to be seen and known and valued. Every human being who has ever lived has asked it, in some form, in some dark hour. The word Jesus spoke in the 7th room was the answer to that question. It was a word from the ancient language of heaven, a language that predates every human tongue, that human language is a pale echo of, and it translates, as best as any translation can carry it, into two English words: you, always. That's it. You, always. Not you conditionally. Not you if you perform well enough. Not you once you clean yourself up and get your theology straight and stop doing the things you know you shouldn't do. You, always. Before you knew his name. Before you believed. Before you tried or failed or gave up or tried again. Before the best thing you ever did and after the worst thing you ever did, and in the middle of everything in between. You, always. He spoke that word, that two-syllable declaration of an eternal, unbreakable, chosen love. And the reason it shattered me is because I suddenly understood that he had been saying it my entire life, whispering it into the silence of every room I had ever sat alone in, writing it into the beauty of every sunset I had ever been too busy to stop and look at, speaking it through the laugh of my mother, through the grip of my daughter's hand, through the crack in the ceiling tile above my hospital bed that looked like a river delta branching toward the light. He had been answering the question the whole time. I just hadn't been listening, and I wept in the 7th room. Not for the first time, you know my record by now, but differently this time. Not from brokenness, from recognition. From the feeling of a man who has spent his whole life searching for something and suddenly realizes he is standing in it, has always been standing in it, and the searching itself was the only thing that obscured it from his view. You, always. That word is for you, right now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. With every unresolved thing and every open wound and every secret and every failure and every question you haven't dared to ask out loud. You, always. He is saying it right now, whether you can hear it or not. The urgent warning. Now I need to speak plainly, without poetry, without metaphor, directly, soul to soul, the way Jesus asked me to speak. In the 7th room, he showed me a world accelerating toward a moment of decision. He showed me the noise increasing and the distractions multiplying, and the distance widening precisely because the time was growing shorter. He said, "The preparation is almost over." I asked him what that meant. He said, "It means that the mercy extended to this generation is not infinite in its duration. It means that every day is a gift and not a guarantee. It means that the urgency your heart feels when you truly sit still and listen, that urgency is not anxiety. It is the Holy Spirit. It is the voice of love that knows what is coming and wants everyone home before it arrives. I am not here to frighten you. Fear is not the point. Fear was never the point. The rooms I walk through are not the rooms of a God who holds eternity over your head to coerce compliance. They were the rooms of a being who loves you with a ferocity and a tenderness and a patience that defies every human analogy, and who is telling you urgently, not because he is angry but because he is love, that the door is open now, and he cannot guarantee it will always be open, and he desperately wants you to walk through it. That is the warning, not wrath, not condemnation, urgency. The urgency of a father who sees his child standing in a road and a car coming and runs. Not to punish, to save. To every person watching this, to the atheist, I was you. Completely, confidently, intellectually you. I had built my fortress of rational certainty brick by brick over decades, and I was proud of it, and I was wrong. Not in a stupid way. I want to be careful here, because dismissing atheism as stupidity is both inaccurate and unhelpful. I was wrong the way a man is wrong who has been studying the map so intently that he has never looked out the window at the actual landscape. The tools of reason that I trusted, they're not the enemy of faith. They led me eventually here, to a testimony that has medical documentation, verifiable details, a physician weeping in a chair beside my bed over a name he had never told me. You don't have to abandon reason to meet Jesus. You have to be willing to follow reason further than you have followed it before, past the edge of what's measurable, into the territory where the evidence is experiential rather than empirical. I dare you. I genuinely dare you. Close your eyes tonight, in the dark, in private where no one can see and your reputation is safe, and say out loud, "If you're real, show me." He showed me. He will show you. To the Muslim, I know you love God. I know your devotion is real and your reverence is sincere, and the discipline of your faith is something that puts my own former indifference to shame. I am not here to disrespect what you believe. I am here to tell you what I experienced. And what I experienced was Jesus, not as a prophet, not as one teacher among many, but as the living God who bears the scars of a cross he chose, because he chose you. The love I encountered in that fourth room, it is the love of a being who did not send a messenger, who came himself, who bled himself, who died and rose because death could not hold the author of life. I am asking you to seek him, not to abandon your reverence for God, but to ask God, sincerely, to show you the full truth about Jesus, and then to wait. He answered me. He will answer you. To the Hindu, the Buddhist, the seeker of every tradition, you have been looking for the truth beneath all truths, the reality behind all realities, the love at the source of all love. I have been there. I have stood at the source, and the source has a face and a name and scars on his hands, and a voice that sounds like thunder and silk, and eyes that hold galaxies in your entire story simultaneously. And he is looking for you with the same urgency and tenderness with which you have been looking for him. The search you have been on your whole life, it ends here. Not in a religion, in a person. To the nominal Christian who has heard all of this before, this one is for me as much as for you. Because the person I was before that Tuesday night was not an atheist. I had been raised with the language of faith, had attended churches, had owned Bibles. I knew the vocabulary. I could discuss the theology. And I was utterly unprepared for what I found, because I had treated the whole thing as a cultural inheritance rather than a living reality. Don't do what I did. Don't sleepwalk through the most important relationship available to you. Don't reduce Jesus to a background assumption, a holiday figure, a box checked on a form that asks about religious affiliation. He is not background. He is not a box. He is the being who knelt beside me in the grass of heaven and held me while I wept over 38 wasted years and forgave every single one of them before I finished asking. Live like eternity is real, because it is. To everyone, to every single person watching this, you don't have to die to meet Jesus. That is perhaps the most important thing I brought back from those 12 minutes and 19 seconds. I went all the way to heaven to learn something that was available to me every day of my life. The love of the fourth room. It's accessible here, now, on this side of the tunnel. The peace I brought back, it's not exclusive to people who have flatlined. It's the inheritance of everyone who comes to Jesus and says, "I need you." You don't need to be flatlining in a hospital bed. You just need to say the words. The prayer. I want to lead you in something right now. Not a religious ritual, not a magic formula, not a transaction, a conversation. The most important conversation you will ever have, with the most important person you will ever meet. A person who already knows your name, your real name, the name he gave you before you existed, and who has been waiting with extraordinary patience for this exact moment. If you're willing, and I'm asking you, I'm begging you to be willing, pray this with me, out loud if you can, in your heart if that's all you have. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how long you've waited, or how far you've wandered, or how many times you've tried and failed and walked away. He is not keeping score of your failures. He is keeping the door open. Pray this. Jesus, I don't fully understand everything, but I believe you are real. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. I believe you walked through those 7 rooms with a man who needed to come back and tell me about it. And I believe you brought me to this video because you have been looking for me. Forgive me for everything. The things I know and the things I've buried and the things I've convinced myself don't matter. Cover all of it with what you did on the cross. Come into my life, not as a concept, as a person, as Lord, as the one who knows my real name and has been saying you always over me since before I was born. I'm yours. I choose you, today, right now, in this moment. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, if those words came from anywhere real inside you, however small, however uncertain, however mixed with doubt, something happened just now that is more significant than anything else that will happen to you today. You were found. Or more accurately, you were always found, and you just finally looked up and saw it. Welcome to the family. Welcome home. I want to close the way I began, with the exact moment my heart stopped, because here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The moment my heart stopped was not the worst moment of my life. It was not even close to the worst moment of my life. The worst moments of my life were the moments I was fully alive and fully present and fully choosing, and choosing wrong. Choosing distance over love. Choosing pride over truth. Choosing the noise over the still small voice that had been whispering, you, always into every room I had ever sat in. The moment my heart stopped was the beginning of the most important education of my existence. And if Jesus can use 12 minutes and 19 seconds of clinical death, can use a flat green line on a monitor, and a coffee stain on a nurse's scrubs, and a crack in a ceiling tile, and a physician's private grief, to reach me, the most resistant student he ever had, he can reach you. He is reaching you. Right now. Through this screen, through this voice, through that thing stirring in your chest that you've been trying to name since this video began. That thing is not the video. That thing is him. He walked me through 7 rooms in heaven. He showed me what's real and what matters and what's coming and what's waiting. And then he sent me back, gave me back my heartbeat and my daughter and my breath and my mission, and said, go, tell them I am. Tell them I am not a religion. Tell them I am a person who loves them. Tell them heaven is real. Tell them hell is real. Tell them the choice is real. Tell them the door is open. And tell them I have been saying their name since before they were born. Tell them the word. So I'm telling you, always. From the mouth of the one who made you, who knows you, who died for you, who rose for you, who walked beside you through every tunnel you've ever traveled, whether you knew it or not. You, always. Don't wait for your own 12 minutes and 19 seconds. Don't wait, please. If this testimony moved you, share it. Not for this channel, not for the algorithm. For the person in your life who is one conversation away from the love of the 4th room. You know who they are. Send it to them tonight. And if you prayed that prayer, tell someone. Leave a comment. Say it out loud somewhere. Because declaring it matters. Because you matter. Because he said so, in a language older than time. In a word that means, you, always.